Well, how is it that we maintain a steady concentration of oxygen in the blood? Well, the stimulus is rising levels of carbon dioxide. So when you are working out or walking or even just thinking, you're making carbon dioxide. Anytime you undergo cellular respiration, which is all the time, you're making carbon dioxide. When you're doing physical work, you're making even more carbon dioxide than you do when you're at rest. And so when CO2 enters the blood, it dissolves and it makes a weak acid called carbonic acid. Carbonic acid lowers the pH of the blood. So it makes the blood a little bit acidic, right? And so that's being pumped throughout the body. And what it does is it eventually changes the pH of the cerebrospinal fluid, which is detected by the medulla oblongata, right? So the medulla oblongata detects that change in pH of that cerebrospinal fluid, that fluid that's in your brain and around your brain there and spinal cord. It detects that change, and then it responds by causing, in this case, the diaphragm to contract more and to increase the depth of ventilation, meaning you're going to breathe deeper and more frequently, and that's going to cause you to get rid of that CO2 and return back to a homeostasis of about 7.4 pH. Okay, just slightly basic. pH of 7 is neutral. So if that pH changes very much, like it goes to 7.2, it's going to cause you to breathe more, and then you'll get rid of that carbon dioxide. In fact, if you hold your breath, you know that panicky feeling when you hold your breath and you really want to breathe? That's not caused by your brain sensing that you need oxygen. Your brain does not really have a sensor for oxygen, but it does have a sensor for having too much carbon dioxide. So if you have too much CO2, your blood becomes more acidic. Your cerebrospinal fluid, therefore, becomes more acidic because it's exchanging with the blood. And your brain, your medulla oblongata, detects that, causes you to change how much you're breathing, increases your breathing rate until you get rid of that CO2, which brings the pH of your blood back closer to homeostasis. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's look at that flow of CO2 then, or flow of oxygen and CO2. So here is the body tissues, anywhere in your body, and of course out here would be your interstitial fluid. So we have CO2 coming off of our body tissues into the capillaries of the blood. These are called systemic capillaries. That means the capillaries of your body. Meanwhile, oxygen is being diffused this way to your body tissues. It's going from high to low, okay? It's higher in the blood than in the tissues, so it diffuses out. And we'll talk more about how this works exactly a little later when we talk about blood flow and things. So CO2 is picked up by the systemic veins. Veins return to the heart. The heart then pumps that oxygen-poor blood via pulmonary arteries, which we'll talk about soon, to the alveoli. There is where gas exchange takes place. CO2 is released and exhaled. Oxygen is brought in, and it goes to the other side of the heart, where it's pressurized and sent through the body to the systemic capillaries, where diffusion takes place and oxygen goes to the body cells. So you can kind of see the flow here of gases. Gases are picked up by the blood. And the next lecture, the next set of lectures, we're going to talk about that blood flow. And one of the things blood carries is this oxygen from the alveoli to the body and then back to the alveoli again, where gas exchange takes place with the environment. So up here is where environmental exchange takes place, right? And down here is where gases are given and taken from body tissues. And so what happens is, as we need to breathe more, as our pH changes, our diaphragm will contract more. It will increase the size of our chest cavity, bringing oxygen in, and then it pushes upward, and that makes the chest cavity smaller, which exhales the air, which pushes the air out. It works a lot like a syringe. You pull down on it, air comes in. You push on it, air goes out. And that's how we inhale and exhale using that negative pressure system. Okay, so we know that we take in take in oxygen. We eat food. We produce carbon dioxide. We exhale carbon dioxide, and that plants can take that CO2 and add some water to it with light energy, and they make sugar and they make oxygen. So I want to focus for a moment on how do plants get the raw ingredients for this process? How do they breathe, essentially? Well, plants have structures called leaves, typically. Sometimes this happens in the stems. They have leaf tissue. Here we see a leaf. We're going to zoom in on it. We're going to look at a leaf in cross-section here. And the leaf has three major tissues here. We have epidermis, and we have two layers of mesophyll. Mesophyll means middle of the leaf. Okay, mesophyll means middle of the leaf. So we have an upper epidermis and a lower epidermis. Oops, here we go. So upper epidermis and a lower epidermis. Okay, and then we have these layers of tissue called mesophyll. We have one layer in a typical plant that's kind of column shaped. And this is where most of the chloroplasts are. This is the Palisade Mesophyll. Palisade means columns. So Palisade Mesophyll. Then down here, there's a bunch of rounder cells that have a lot of air spaces between them. This is called the spongy mesophyll. Okay, so we have an upper epidermis, lower epidermis, and we have these mesophyll cells. And then also in the epidermis, we have these special cells that have gaps between them. This entire structure is called a stoma, or plural is stomata. Okay, they can be on the top of the leaf or the bottom, but they're usually more common on the bottom of the leaf. So here's one in this picture. You can kind of see it. Here's another one. You can see that opening. Okay, the cells on either side of the stoma are called guard cells. So here's a picture of one looking at a leaf from the outside. You can see the pore, which is the opening, and the guard cells in that epidermis there. So the stomata, or stomata being plural, is a structure shaped kind of like this, two cells called guard cells, and those guard cells can fill full of water and open, or they can lose water and close. And they open and shut like that. And that allows for gas exchange. So gases come in the stomata, and then the spongy mesophyll is the gas exchange tissue. Okay, that's where all the gas exchange takes place inside the plant. And then the other thing in the leaf are the veins. So veins are in the leaf composed of xylem and phloem, which we'll talk about a little more later. Xylem and phloem comprise the veins, and they carry water and sugars and things from the roots to the leaves and back and forth there. So if we zoom in on some mesophyll tissue, so this is spongy mesophyll. Notice all that surface area. Tons of surface area for gas exchange. So this is spongy mesophyll. Lots of air spaces, and they would be right next to a stomata, so air would be coming in and out, and gas exchange would be facilitated there. Compare that to this structure. That's a lung of a lizard. See how similar they are? See how analogous they are? Obviously, these are not similar structures because of common ancestry, but they're shared by common function, structure and function. Organisms arrive at similar adaptations to solve similar problems, and I think that's a really powerful example of that. So make sure you know the layers of a leaf. Note that the Palisade Mesophyll is where the bulk of the light reactions take place for photosynthesis. That's where most of the chloroplasts are. Spongy Mesophyll is where gas exchange takes place. And stomata are composed of two guard cells and then the whole, which is just called a pore. And those guard cells can swell up turgid, or they can dehydrate, and that causes them to open or shut, allowing for gas exchange into that leaf. And they have similar tissues to a lung tissue in that sense, that spongy mesophyll. Okay, so we're going to go from here into the circulatory system, and that'll be in the next set of videos.